So you want to pass the bar exams. Well, you already know the devil is in the details, especially with Philippine criminal law. Today, we're going to build a bulletproof mind map of the Revised Penal Code. Specifically, we're breaking down Book 1, Articles 16 through 20. By the end of this explainer, you'll know exactly who is criminally liable and why.
Picture this high-stakes scenario. A terrible crime goes down. You weren't there. You literally had no idea it was going to happen. But afterward, you help hide the murder weapon. So what does this all mean for you? Are you just as guilty as the person who actually pulled the trigger? Does the law look at the mastermind and the cleanup crew and treat them exactly the same? Figuring out the answer to that forms the absolute foundation of how justice is applied.
Okay, let's dive straight into this. Here is the mental map we'll use to navigate everything today. 1. Who commits the crime? 2. Principles. 3. Accomplices. 4. Accessories. 5. Conspiracy. And finally, number 6. Jurisdiction. All right, starting right off with Section 1, who commits the crime, covered under Article 16.
You see, under Article 16, criminal liability isn't just a simple black and white, guilty or not guilty thing. It's actually all based on your level of participation and, crucially, your timing. This creates 3 descending buckets of culpability. First up, we have the principles under Article 17. Second are the accomplices under Article 18. And third, the accessories under Article 19. Seriously, memorize this hierarchy. Treat it as the trunk of our mind map, and all the other rules will snap perfectly into place.
Moving right along to Section 2, principles. These are the main actors. Now, a principal is someone who takes a direct, immediate part in a crime, or contributes an absolutely indispensable act. Under Article 17, this actually happens in one of 3 ways. First, by direct participation. That's the person who physically commits the act. Think of the actual physical stabber. Second, by induction. This is the mastermind, the one who forces or maybe pays for the crime to happen. And third, by indispensable cooperation. That's performing an act without which the crime would completely fail, like serving as the ultimate lookout. And here is what you absolutely must remember for your exams. Whether you're the one holding the weapon, the mastermind pulling the strings, or that indispensable lookout, you're all equally liable. The baseline penalty adjustment is literally 0. Yep, 0. Unless there are specific mitigating or aggravating circumstances at play, all 3 types of principles get hit with the exact same penalty under the law. Now, let's step down a level to Section 3, accomplices. Let's call them the supporting cast. So, the crucial point is, what's the real difference between an indispensable principal and an accomplice? Well, an accomplice knows the criminal design and cooperates, but their acts are merely secondary. They are definitely not indispensable. For example, say you hand over a security guard schedule to someone. Sure, it makes a burglary easier, but the crime could still happen without it, right? Because your help wasn't totally vital, that makes you an accomplice. Because an accomplice's role is less direct, merely supportive, the law actually cuts them a little bit of slack. If we look at the penalty math under Article 52, accomplices are generally given a penalty exactly 1 degree lower than the penalty prescribed for the principals. Moving down to our final bucket of liability in Section 4, accessories. These guys are the cleanup crew. Accessories are defined under Article 19, and they had absolutely 0 part in the actual commission of the crime itself. Like I said, they are the cleanup crew. And this brilliantly illustrates that timing is the ultimate differentiator here. If you participate through previous or simultaneous acts, you're a principal or an accomplice. But if your involvement happens exclusively after the fact, that's when you become an accessory. So what exactly does an accessory do? Article 19 actually recognizes 3 very specific after-the-fact behaviors. First up, providing assistance to escape, meaning you knowingly harbor or conceal the offenders. Second, profiting from the crime yourself or helping someone else benefit from its proceeds. And third, obstruction of justice. This would be like concealing or destroying that murder weapon we talked about at the very beginning of this explainer. Now, because the accessory's involvement is the absolute furthest removed from the core criminal act, their punishment is the most significantly reduced. To put that into perspective, accessories generally receive a penalty that is 2 full degrees lower than the penalty prescribed for the principal actors. But wait, there is a massive exception regarding accessories that you absolutely need to commit to memory. We're talking about the relatives exemption under Article 20. The law actually recognizes the intense bonds of blood and family. So if you act as an accessory, say by helping someone escape or by hiding evidence, you are completely exempt from accessory liability if the offender is your spouse, your ascendant, descendant, legitimate or adopted sibling, or a relative by affinity within the same degree. It's a real game changer.
However, beware of this classic bar exam trap. That family exemption, it has a hard limit. The relative exemption completely disappears if the underlying offense they committed is a crime against chastity, such as rape. In those specific, heinous instances, even a parent or spouse who helps an offender escape will for sure be held liable as an accessory. No exceptions.
All right, let's look at Section 5, Conspiracy and Unity of Purpose.
Now, what's really interesting about this is that up until now, we've carefully separated everyone based on their specific acts. But conspiracy flattens our entire mind map. When a conspiracy is proven, meaning there was a clear agreement and an overt act to commit the crime, the law basically no longer cares who did what. The act of one literally becomes the act of all. Every single conspirator is treated as a principal and receives the maximum penalty, completely regardless of their physical participation.
And finally, Section 6, Key Jurisprudence Anchor. Let's move to and see how this builds. To truly master this stuff for the bar, you need to anchor these concepts to actual Supreme Court rulings. Let's run through these quickly. First, People v. Sumilo. This one clarifies the strict elements required to convict a principal by inducement. Next, People v. Lizala highlights why proving conspiracy is vital to hold all participants equally liable. And finally, People v. Mendoza heavily emphasizes how the exact timing and nature of acts separate an accomplice from an accessory. So we've covered the hierarchy of liability, the absolute crucial role of timing, the exceptions for family, and the flattening effect of conspiracy. To wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a provocative scenario to really test what you've learned. We know under Article 20 that a brother is exempt from accessory liability if he hides his sibling after a crime. But what if the sibling paid him to do it and he profited from the crime? Does the relative exemption still shield him, or does that profit motive completely override the family tie under Article 19? Think through the mind map we just built. Until next time, stay focused and keep learning.